No one has more state pride than New Mexicans. The vibrant culture, bold flavors, unique history, and dramatic landscapes under our Zia sun are like no other. And the people of New Mexico are a rare breed. As diverse as we are, together we breathe life and soul into this high desert land. A land that promises adventure. I'm Michael Newman, and as your host, I'll be taking you with me as I seek out the best the land of enchantment has to offer.
New Mexico, it feels like home to me. It feels so true. It's time well spent when I spend it with you.
Thanks for tuning in for another episode of New Mexico True Television. I'm your host, Michael Newman. In this episode, we're touring sites revealing the unique history of the southeastern corner of our state. From the days of pioneers and ranching to the atomic era and the dawn of rock and roll, these locales may surprise you. On US 82, 4 hours east of Las Cruces, is the town of Lovington. Just shy of the Texas state line, this town is home to the Lee County Fair, a tradition bringing people from around the region to this event every August. In this country, cattle is king, and the abundance of livestock here reveals the strong role agriculture plays in the surrounding communities. The fact is, while carnival rides and rodeo shows have become synonymous with the fairs of today, the inception of the county fair was rooted in exhibitions showcasing modern farming techniques.
Hey guys. How's it going? They're all so cute.
All these cuties are the beauty queens and kings of the agricultural animal kingdom, awaiting their turn to appear in front of the livestock judges.
You're just a standard fancy.
Just as I'm getting acquainted with my chicken breeds, I'm pulled in another direction though.
Looks like we have a swine competition going on.
From the beginning, livestock shows have been a key component of the county fair. And up next are some of the most handsome hogs I have ever seen. These swine are being judged on a number of qualities we don't necessarily associate with pigs. Cleanliness and grooming, being docile and well-behaved, and following the gentle guidance of their person are winning characteristics the judges are looking for. No doubt, their physique is important too. This is no easy task for the judge, I imagine. I adore all of them. No worries, guys. You're all winners in my book. Beyond swine, market lambs, meat and dairy goats, rabbits, poultry, and cattle will be shown this week, finalizing in a sale of champions.
So what's your name?
Olivia.
Olivia, how old are you?
I'm 9.
9. So what are you doing at the fair today?
I just finished showing my pig, and I thought he would do good, but he didn't do that good.
But did you place?
Yeah.
What place did you get? Hey, that's you. You gotta play. Well, you gotta start somewhere. And you come back next year, you know exactly what you need to do.
I have faith Olivia will come back a winner. And just one row over is another handsome animal that could be a solid candidate for the blue ribbon.
So this is your steer here, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of cow is he?
He is a shorthorn cross.
Shorthorn cross. And what did you have to do to get him ready to show today?
Well, you have to make him gentle so you can walk him around, and you have to make sure they stay clean and just make sure they're fed well and all that.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful looking steer though, so.
Thank you.
You've done a good job.
Thank you.
Seeing these kids with their animals has elevated my respect for what they're doing.
It builds a lot of responsibility. Mm-hmm. It gives these kids a lot of animal science skills, feeding and nutrition skills. It's a way of teaching them without them even understanding what they're learning.
Right, it's more experiential. So what can tourists look forward to if they come to the fair, coming to see these competitions and see the animals?
Michael, it's unique because you'll find a parent, say an urban parent or someone like that that's coming through here with their young children. They've never seen a cow. They've never touched a cow or a pig or a goat or a lamb, and they don't know where their food from their table comes from. I think that's what built the fairs throughout the U.S. was the agricultural part to it.
There's been that tradition that's gone on for so many years. People, coming to the fair, and people kind of lost track of that. That Americana experience of every year we can look forward to going to the county, the state fair, and
that's exactly right.
And of course, no fair would be complete without its queens.
So as you can tell, I'm amongst lots of royalty, lots of queens in the house. So what does it mean to be part of rodeo heritage and the culture?
Rodeo evolved from ranch work back in the Western days, like way back.
Way back.
And they made the events that are done in rodeo, like roping. They got that from roping cattle in the fields. Barrel racing. Some cowgirls did just for fun, and they made it an event. Bull riding, breaking bulls, bareback riding, breaking horses. It all evolved from ranching.
Having covered sufficient ground in the agricultural arena, I head outside in search of another prize-worthy county fair staple. Can you guess? That's right, the turkey leg. When else can you justify eating a piece of poultry bigger than your own head? It may take a few before this thing has digested and I'm ready for the carnival rides. Where should I start? Definitely not ready for that one. Hanging upside down would not be good for me right now. No spinning or going in circles either. What to do, where to go that won't make me nauseous? Yes, the Ferris wheel, a classic.
All right, here we go. This has always been one of my favorite memories about coming to the fair, was going on the Ferris wheel. Woo! Oh, this takes me back to my childhood.
And that, my friends, is reason enough to go to the Lee County Fair. Remember, this event happens once a year every August, so be sure to mark your calendars. And while you're in the area, a great food pit stop is Avila's Nippa Hut in Hobbs, a member along the Breakfast Burrito Byway. Up next, a visit to one of Carlsbad's treasures above ground. Sitting in the middle of downtown Carlsbad in the midst of the serene Halagüeño Arts Park is the Carlsbad Museum and Art Center. Even before entering the museum, you are surrounded by art. From the murals on the walls to the sculptures placed throughout the park, the city has created an inviting environment for guests to the museum. Devoted to its local and regional history, within these walls, you'll find a collection of Native American art and artifacts, as well as modern and contemporary Southwestern art, among them pieces from the Taos 10. Enriching this collection are the temporary exhibit galleries, which guarantee you're likely to see something new with each visit. But one of the most beloved exhibits here is the giant recreation of turn-of-the-century Carlsbad, chugging through it a steam train, the lifeline of the town.
Is this exactly what it was, or is it kind of like a vague replica?
No, it is basically an exact replica. What we use is old pictures.
Okay.
And we used for the city part also an original Sanborn fire insurance map.
Wow.
And that's the reason why we built 1905. Actually, on the maps, you can see how the city was built, the footprints, and then you also can see what kind of business which was in which building.
Wow.
And that's the interesting part.
And how long does it take to make something like this? I can only imagine.
The whole thing so far took us 2,400 hours.
So some serious commitment.
Yeah. We underestimated a little bit the hours.
Every minute detail has been taken into account, making it a spectacular study of life in those days. Through Willie and his collaborators' work, you see the devotion of the community to their museum, which is also evidenced in the historical exhibit of the Bataan Death March, in which thousands of American and Filipino soldiers were surrendered to the Japanese and marched under excruciating and often fatal conditions through the Philippine jungles in World War II. A historical moment in time very close to the hearts of Carlsbad residents. I had the chance to speak with one of those residents today, whose father is memorialized in the photos hanging behind me.
What's the importance of having an exhibit like this in Carlsbad too? Because even in the pictures you see a lot of places in New Mexico. So can you kind of give a context of Carlsbad place in that?
The 200th Coast Artillery was made up of soldiers from around New Mexico. And when they got to Fort Bliss, draftees joined them there.
Okay.
But when they left for the Philippines, there were 1,800.
Wow.
And here in Carlsbad, we have about 135 veterans from Eddy County that went over there. My father was a Bataan veteran. It's just an important part of Carlsbad's history because so many young men that grew up together here did leave, and not all of them came back.
Right.
What an incredible tribute to the veterans and all those whose lives were impacted by this moment in history. The Carlsbad Museum and Art Center is truly a gem, encapsulating 100 years of history all under one roof. Beyond the exhibit at the museum, you can also honor the veterans of this march by participating in the Bataan Memorial Death March at the White Sands Missile Range that happens every March. A great follow-up to your museum visit is a meal at the Trinity Hotel and Restaurant, just a few short blocks away, a location also rich in history. And don't leave Carlsbad without visiting its greatest natural wonder, the Carlsbad Caverns. One of the more charming and unusual things you will come across in Portales is the large collection of windmills housed at the Roosevelt County Fairgrounds. Collected over 3 decades by locals Bill and Alta Daly, it is fitting these windmills have found their home in Portales, a town in the high plains of eastern New Mexico, a region that could not have been settled without this technology. Utilizing the energy from the wind to pump water out of the ground, windmills allowed early pioneers to settle where there was no water supply. Prior to this, the only inhabitable areas for settlers were spots near watering holes, springs, creeks, and rivers. Windmills also played a crucial role in the railroad beginning in the early 1870s, providing the necessary water for steam-powered locomotives to make their cross-country journeys. Windmills were placed along the railways every 20 miles so the trains could refuel. Windmills also opened up the plains of West Texas and eastern New Mexico to settlers, and became landmarks to cowboys and other travelers as they made their way across the plains. Today, travelers still take note of these iconic structures dotting the landscape, but it is truly a wonder to see them collected all in one place, each one having stood the test of time, each of them unique and beautiful in their old age. Together, they are a sight not to be missed. The heart of rock and roll is still beating in Clovis. Stay tuned. Sign up to receive monthly newsletters about events and happenings around the state at newmexico.org. And now from the pages of New Mexico Magazine. Sitting in the heart of downtown Clovis is the Norman and Vi Petty Rock and Roll Museum. A tribute to this musical legend and the early days of rock and roll, the museum houses a reconstructed recording studio, countless musical paraphernalia, and plenty of studio and backstage photographs documenting this monumental era. So why here in Clovis? Of all the fascinating history that has occurred in our state, perhaps one of the lesser-known tales is the story of Clovis's native son Norman Petty and the role he and his hometown played in the history of rock and roll. In a nutshell, Norman Petty was a gifted musician and brilliant soundman. His precision and knack for sound, as well as his experimental inclinations, created the sound most notably heard in the legendary tracks of Buddy Holly and Roy Orbison, iconic musicians whose recordings at Norman Petty's studio helped launch their careers. The studio at the museum is fashioned after the original studio, located at its original address, 1313 West 7th Street. Kenneth Broad runs it today, and I've set up an appointment to see the studio in person.
This is the room where most of the artists would assemble when sessions were underway. And Norman Petty recorded by sessions and not by the hour. He didn't believe that creativity came by the clock.
And what kind of producer, what kind of person was he in the music sense?
Oh, he was very exacting, perfectionist, had perfect pitch, but he was a kind, gentle man that really had a lot of patience with artists that came here to record. I was told about one session they had 84, 85 takes on it.
Let's talk about what Norman's musical kind of sound was, because what he created here in Clovis was something that no one had ever seen. It influenced the likes of the Beatles and all these other people that came out of that sound.
Rock and roll came here because Buddy Holly had been turned down at Decca and came back to Lubbock to talk to the disc jockey there. What am I going to do? They don't want my music. He said, well, why don't you try Clovis, New Mexico? Norman Petty has his own studio. The studio was put here for the Norman Petty Trio.
Okay.
It wasn't intended to begin with to record artists from anywhere around the country, but when Roy Orbison came here, he needed something done. And Buddy Knox came here to get some things done, so it became more commercial then as it spread out to other artists. It was coming so rapidly they could hardly keep up with it. They had 12 major hits in 15 months' time, and much of it right out of this studio. And Norman told him along, you know, the way things are going, Buddy, you need to get a manager. And Buddy said, well, I have one. He said, well, who is it? He said, you are. But Norman did sacred music. He did easy listening. He also did country. And rock and roll and a lot of early 70s.
But he was versatile. I think that's what kind of made him relevant.
Not many studios were as versatile or as innovative as Norman Petty began.
So he had no boundaries. He was unorthodox. If it created the sound that he wanted to do something different, and he did it. And talk about sound. Kenneth took me over to hear some of the original Buddy Holly tracks.
When they finished a session, they would come in and listen to the playback. So why don't you have a seat here where Buddy Holly sat? It's the very same chair.
This is it.
That's what I usually do when people want to hear what it sounded like then, because they wanted to know then what they were going to sound like on the radio.
Right. Yeah, that stereo sound. You feel like you get every bit of the recording. You know, you can tell that it was all.
It's just like you were there. This is a time capsule.
Totally. On that note, pun intended, Kenneth showed me some of the rare vintage instruments still harbored in the studio. I even had the chance to play Vi Petty's piano, the same one used in all of the Buddy Holly songs. And the sound of this room is something you have to experience to believe. Every panel, every wall was designed by Norman to get the sound he desired. The precision that went into each detail is astounding. Beyond the mind-blowing sound, sitting in this room amidst all these instruments, you can feel the energy of the musical legends that once played them. And the fact you can have this type of interactive experience, that these instruments are not placed behind ropes, is remarkable. The Norman and Vi Petty Rock and Roll Museum is open Monday through Friday and by appointment on Saturdays. To tour the recording studio, plan well in advance and book an appointment with Kenneth. And make sure to have him play the master track of Buddy Holly's Heartbeat for you in the control room. To continue your trip down memory lane, grab a bite at the 1950s classic Foxy Drive-In down the street, some of the best taquitas in the state. For more great stories like this from New Mexico Magazine, visit newmexico.org. Don't go away. We're headed for a place where events change the course of human history. Do you take a lot of pictures on your New Mexico travels? Well, if you do, show us by hashtagging New Mexico True on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just 10 miles south of Socorro and over an hour south of Albuquerque off US 380 East, you will find the Stallion Gate entrance to the White Sands Missile Range, where twice a year the public is able to visit the Trinity Site. When the site is open, it brings people in droves, and understandably so, as the events at this site changed the course of human history. It was in this remote locale where the first atomic bomb was detonated on July 16, 1945, after being scrupulously and arduously developed in Los Alamos as part of the Manhattan Project. After the successful testing of the atom bomb at Trinity, it would go on to be used against Japan during World War II, with the hopes of bringing an end to this long, devastating war. But also with its unveiling would be the dawn of a new era. Its monumental place in history, along with its limited access, spurs the curiosity of thousands, and twice a year visitors make the pilgrimage to Trinity. This year, I am one of them. It is hard to put into words the feeling you get when standing at ground zero of the detonation site, and no doubt it resonates differently for each person here. Beyond the marker standing in the center of the site, on the 2 days Trinity opens to the public, photos are exhibited on the fencing surrounding the perimeter. On site was author and historian Jim Eccles, who was there to answer questions from the crowd and enlighten us on the events of that day in July of 1945. What was it about this location that made it the prime spot for the testing?
Well, Los Alamos looked at a lot of different sites. The sand dunes up in Colorado, Catalina Island off the west coast of California, Padre Island in Texas. So a lot of different sites. Gallup and Grants came up the lava field. But this was already under the control of the Alamogordo bombing range. And so they looked at a couple of places here, and it had a number of advantages. It was fairly close to Los Alamos. It was already under the control of the government, wide open desert, low population densities, railroad out there to the west, a good highway connecting to Los Alamos. And so in late '44, they decided to come down here and set this site aside as the test site.
Okay, so it kind of was a lot of planning beforehand to get to that point.
Exactly.
Okay, and so on that day, can you walk me through what that was like? Who were the people that were, privileged to be here at that moment in time? The top secret security, nobody knew about what was happening here, right?
Right. First of all, let's say that the bomb was placed on top of a 100-foot steel tower here and detonated at the top of the tower. The nearest people were at bunkers 10,000 yards to the south, west, and north. The south one was where Oppenheimer was located. And it's also where the guys were that threw the switch to trigger the bomb, all the instrumentation and all those kinds of things. A large group of people, several hundred, were down at base camp, which is 10 miles to the southwest. That's where General Groves watched from. He couldn't be in the same place as Oppenheimer was if there was anything dangerous going on.
Are there accounts of what the immediate reaction was?
So there's a lot of different points of view from different aspects because of the different locations.
Right.
And then also the reaction for what they'd done.
Right.
It worked. Okay, we've solved this problem. It's time to move on. And so a lot of these guys immediately take off back to Los Alamos. Many of them head to the Pacific, to Tinian, where they're actually going to assemble the bombs to use against Japan.
Wow. So there wasn't really a big lapse of time between
No, I mean, it's immediately, let's move on to the next step. Wow. The next step is to use it.
Okay, that's crazy. I mean, imagine being in that environment and seeing something that has never happened on the face of the planet.
Still wrapping my head around all the details Jim just shared with me, I head for the Schmidt McDonald Ranch House. Initially built in 1913 by German immigrant and homesteader Franz Schmidt, the ranch was sold to George McDonald, who lived there with his family from the 1920s until 1942, when the McDonalds were forced to vacate the property when it became part of the Alamogordo Bombing and Gunnery Range. The home stood abandoned until personnel with the Manhattan Project determined it would be the site for the assembly of the plutonium core of the bomb. Upon entry to the house, you immediately are drawn into the plutonium assembly room. In addition to the informative photographs and articles on exhibit at the house, in walking from room to room, you can't help but notice the aged floorboards, the beautiful but worn stencils and paint on the walls. Walls that hold a detailed account of history few of us can fathom. Standing and looking north to the detonation site, I try to imagine what the people at Trinity experienced that day. The day the world changed forever. 2 days a year, Trinity Site opens to the public, typically the first Saturday of April and October. This is a free event where no reservations are required. Check the White Sands Missile Range website for details. You may go on your own, but you may want to look into guided tours hosted by organizations or museums like the Los Alamos Historical Museum. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the Southeast's fascinating history. Hopefully, it inspires some of your future travels. With that being said, what are you doing next weekend?